Large-scale protests in Korea against Japan's decision to pour nuclear wastewater into the ocean. 7 people sentenced after breaking the law over mask ban. Donald Trump and his supporters remain defiant despite charges. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. There were more international protests against Japan's release of radioactive water from Fukushima as thousands of protesters in South Korea voiced their objection today. Japan's controversial move is also affecting its domestic market. Fish auction prices fell amid uncertainty over how seafood consumers will respond. The power plant, which was damaged in the 2011 earthquake and tsunami, began sending the treated nuclear wastewater into the Pacific Ocean on Thursday. Tracy Furness reports.
The impact of the released radioactive wastewater into the Pacific Ocean is being felt at this fishing port south of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Hideaki Igari is a middleman at the Numanouchi fishing port. He said the price of flounder, one of Fukushima's signature fish, was about 10% lower on Friday at the morning auction. Flounder used to fetch 3,500 yen per kilogram before the treated wastewater release, but today it was about 500 yen lower, he said. This restaurateur in Iwaki, Fukushima, said that after 1 p.m. on Thursday, when the first batch of wastewater was released, he had fewer customers at his restaurant, but he said today business is back to normal. He said the data Tokyo Electric Power released about the dilution of the radioactive water is meaningless as we don't know how much tritium in the water is bad for you. Meanwhile, in Shanghai Friday, seafood vendors voiced their support for China's ban on all aquatic products from Japan. This vendor says the ban on all Japanese seafood is good. There are too many carcinogens in nuclear radiation, so we don't think about getting imports from Japan at all. At this frozen food stall, they have noticed a difference in the number of customers over the past few days. Before August 24th, every day was busy, but since then until today, it's not busy at all. China has urged Japan to immediately stop discharging nuclear-contaminated water into the ocean, calling it selfish and irresponsible. At a meeting of the United Nations General Assembly Friday, China's Deputy Permanent Representative to the UN, Geng Shuan, said, "So far, Japan has failed to address the major concerns of the international community about the long-term reliability of nuclear-contaminated water purification devices, the accuracy of nuclear-contaminated water data, and the validity of the discharge monitoring program." In the wake of China's ban on aquatic products from Japan, Russia hopes to increase its marine product exports to the country. It is mainly exporting pollock, herring, flounder, sardine, cod and crab. And in South Korea today, thousands of protesters gathered in Seoul to condemn Japan's actions as they criticized the South Korean government for endorsing the release of the treated radioactive wastewater into the Pacific Ocean. This environmental activist called for the Japanese government to immediately stop the release. She urged the South Korean government to do what China is doing, which is stop the import of Japanese seafood. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
With Japan discharging nuclear wastewater, Hong Kong has banned aquatic product imports from 10 metropolis or prefectures, while the mainland's restriction covers all Japanese aquatic products. Secretary for Environment and Ecology Tse Chin-wan explained why Hong Kong authorities are not following China's decision to put a blanket ban. Currently, Hong Kong has banned the import of aquatic products from 10 regions, including Tokyo and Fukushima. Secretary for Environment and Ecology Tse Chin-wan said he's heard comments that people should not worry about the nuclear-contaminated water because it's been treated and fits international standards. But he said several events proved there are still risks. Tse said, in May this year, a fish was caught in Japan and the radioactivity level has exceeded the acceptable level by 180 times. He added the Japanese government has never elaborated on what caused the incident or how to prevent this from happening. Zhe added just last week there was leakage from a tank that contained contaminated water because the pipes broke. With China imposing a blanket ban on the imports of all aquatic products from Japan, Zhe was asked why Hong Kong did not follow suit. Zhe said it's because each place has its own legal systems, laws, ways to do things, as well as regulations against the food imports and exports. He said whether the action would affect trade relations between Hong Kong and Japan was not a main concern. As for residents scrambling for salt, the Environment Secretary believes there are misconceptions that consuming salt can reduce the impact of radiation. But he warns residents that it's impossible to prevent radiation by eating salt. Zhe added there are currently 1 month's worth of salt supply in Hong Kong, and the public should not worry. After Tokyo released nuclear wastewater into the ocean off Fukushima, some local residents said they will not pick Japan as their travel destination in the near future. Several travel agencies said Japan tour group numbers have dropped by around 30% since the wastewater discharge. Timothy Lee tells us more.
Japan has long been a top travel destination for Hong Kongers, and many were keen to go there after years of COVID-19 restrictions. But with Japan having decided to discharge radioactive wastewater into the ocean on Thursday, many have changed their minds. This mother said she and her daughter originally planned to visit Japan, but canceled their trip because of the wastewater issue. This woman says she will still fly to the country, but will try to avoid eating seafood. A spokesperson from the tourism sector noted a drop in business by around 30% over the past few days. He added he is concerned about the wastewater's effect on the tourism industry during Christmas and Chinese New Year. However, others in the sector believe the business slowdown will only be temporary, saying that locals returned to Japan just 3 weeks after the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. Some travel agencies pointed out they would not make adjustments to meals of their Japan tour groups, but will ask staff to remind travelers not to buy large quantities of seafood to take back home. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
On the mainland, some Japanese restaurant operators are worried that rising anti-Japanese sentiment will affect their business. In Guangzhou, some Japanese restaurant owners said they believe the nuclear wastewater discharge issue has led to a surge in nationalism, as well as negative feelings about Japan. Some Guangzhou residents said they are angry at the actions by Japan, adding that they will boycott Japanese goods such as food and clothing in addition to aquatic products. However, some mainland travel agencies noted hundreds of people are still registering for tour groups to Japan. In other news, 7 people were convicted of rioting a day after a citywide mass ban took effect in 2019. Today, 4 of them were sentenced to at least 50 months in prison. During sentencing, Deputy District Court Judge Karen Leung said the case took place during a time of serious disorder in the city. She noted some 500 protesters gathered in Wan Chai, Causeway Bay and Admiralty for about 45 minutes that day, blocking traffic and affecting pedestrians and residents. Protesters were digging up bricks and hurling petrol bombs. After taking reference from other cases, the judge sentenced 4 defendants aged between 25 and 36 to more than 4 years in prison. The remaining defendants under the ages of 21 were sent to training centers. In the U.S., a historic mugshot was taken after a scowling Donald Trump turned himself in at a jail in Georgia on charges of scheming to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential elections. The mugshot has since gone viral, with Trump's followers using it to rally support for the 2024 presidential elections. NBC has the story.
Tonight, former President Trump is speaking out about that unprecedented photograph, seen literally around the world. His mugshot, a historic first after surrendering at a Georgia jail.
I was treated very nicely, but it is what it is. I took a mugshot, which I never heard the words mugshot. Didn't teach me that at the Wharton School of Finance.
Mr. Trump spent less than 20 minutes inside the Fulton County Jail, where he was booked, his information already pre-submitted: height, weight, and hair color, strawberry blonde. He was then released on a $200,000 bond, afterward saying he's only being charged because he's the Republican frontrunner.
I did nothing wrong. What they're doing is election interference.
With the deadline of noon today now passed, all 19 defendants have officially surrendered in Georgia. They are accused of running a criminal enterprise to try and overturn the state's 2020 presidential election results. Today, the first court appearance in the case. Harrison Floyd was denied bond, appearing by video from jail.
There's no way that I'm a flight risk.
Meanwhile, President Biden had this reaction to his predecessor's mugshot.
Handsome guy. Wonderful guy.
Trump's Republican rivals are weighing in too.
I mean, the idea that we're seeing a mugshot of a 77-year-old former president, I mean, how did we get to this point?
I think it is a shame that our nation is forced to go through these politicized persecutions.
Mr. Trump is looking to turn it into a political asset. Within hours, his campaign started selling T-shirts. The caption, "Never surrender." And he posted the picture on X, formerly Twitter, his first post there in more than 2 years, following his suspension after January 6th.
Still ahead on tonight's news. Mystery over whether Wagner leader is actually dead. Head of British Museum resigns over failure to deal with theft in the museum. And a look at how dogs can help on International Dog Day. Welcome back to TVB News. The Kremlin has rejected allegations it was behind a plane crash that is presumed to have killed mercenary leader Yevgeny Prigozhin, who led a brief mutiny in Russia 2 months ago. Prigozhin, whose brutal Wagner Group fighters played a key role in Ukraine, was spoken of fairly warmly by President Vladimir Putin, even as suspicions grew that the Russian leader was responsible for the crash. Nasvi Karim has more.
Past enemies of Russian President Vladimir Putin have been dealt with in a variety of ways. Poisoned by polonium-laced tea, touching a deadly nerve agent, or being shot at close range. No one, though, had previously perished in an air accident, at least publicly. Yevgeny Prigozhin, former leader of the Wagner private army, was believed to be among the passengers on a private jet that crashed on Wednesday soon after takeoff from Moscow en route to St. Petersburg. Almost the entire Wagner leadership was reportedly also on board. On Thursday, Putin expressed his condolences to Prigozhin's family, describing him as a man of difficult fate who performed his duties and was a talented businessman. He said an investigation was underway. It was left to Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov to reject allegations on Friday that the Kremlin was behind the plane crash. Peskov said forensic investigations and black box analysis will determine if Prigozhin was indeed aboard the flight and the cause of the crash. A preliminary U.S. intelligence assessment concluded the plane was downed by an intentional explosion. Tens of thousands of Wagner mercenaries fought and lost their lives in Ukraine, helping Russia capture the strategic city of Bakhmut in Donetsk after months of heavy fighting. In late June, Prigozhin's forces carried out a failed mutiny against the Russian Defense Ministry. They agreed to exile in Belarus if Moscow dropped treason charges. Supporters of Prigozhin brought flowers and flags to a makeshift memorial at the Wagner Group headquarters in St. Petersburg. Former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Kurt Volker, said he believed Putin was sending a warning to others.
That is the whole point behind Putin doing this, and doing it in so demonstrative a way. He is trying to give people that sense of pause and say, okay, you may not like the way things are going, but if you go against me, I have the means to take you out. That's what he's trying to signal.
Nasvi Karim, TVB News.
In the UK, the director of the British Museum is stepping down with immediate effect after admitting to failings in the museum's investigation into the theft of items from its collection. Hardwick Fisher, who was due to leave his post next year, said the failings must ultimately rest with him. He said after reviewing the events around the thefts from the British Museum, it is evident that the British Museum did not respond as comprehensively as it should have. A member of staff was dismissed last week after items including gold jewellery and gems dating from the 15th century BC to the 19th century AD were found to be missing, stolen or damaged. An ancient cultural expert contacted the museum repeated over the possible theft but was largely ignored. The descendants of a 19th century Scottish sugar and coffee planter who owned thousands of slaves in Guyana apologized on Friday for their ancestors' role in the slave trade. Charles Gladstone is the descendant of slave owner Sir John Gladstone, who was the father of former British Prime Minister William Gladstone. Charles Gladstone called slavery a crime against humanity with lasting negative impacts.
To the people of Guyana, we, the undersigned, are descendants of Sir John Gladstone, 1st Baronet of Farsk and Balfour, and we wish to offer our sincerest apologies for his actions in holding your ancestors in slavery in Demerara, now Guyana. We understand that we cannot change history, but we believe that we can have an impact on the world in which we live. And in apologising for the actions of our ancestors, we hope to work towards a better future.
A day before, Guyana President Irfan Ali, who was not present when Gladstone apologized, demanded compensation and lashed out at the descendants of European slave traders. A SpaceX Dragon spacecraft with 4 astronauts aboard launched from Cape Canaveral, Florida today. The Crew 7 spacecraft took off at 7:26 a.m. GMT. It's heading for the International Space Station. The journey is expected to take 22 hours. The crew will conduct research and scientific experiments. A government district officer was criticized by former Chief Executive Lam Chun-ying for attending an extravagant farewell dinner. Secretary for Home and Youth Affairs Alice Mack said such events are regularly organized for popular civil servants and that civil servants must declare activities they attend. Steve Wong, district officer in Wong Tai Sin, was criticized for attending a large farewell dinner which featured about 500 participants. Former Chief Executive Lam Chun-ying called the event wasteful spending and said he's suspicious of where the money for the banquet came from. Today marks International Dog Day. For the first time, the MTR has allowed canines, apart from guide dogs, on board as trains, and they're known as doctor dogs. That's in the hope of letting people better understand animal-assisted therapy.
Fat is an 11-year-old Pomeranian, but he's already been a doctor almost all his life. Today is his first time taking an MTR. But before his debut, his guardian first needs to put him inside a special bag and walk to the last car of the train. Travelling from Hong Kong Station to Exhibition Centre Station, Fat had to stay in the bag at all times. The dog's guardian, Thomas Wong, said he's finally doing something meaningful with him. Wong added over the past 8 years, Fat has visited elderly care homes or the Hong Kong Boys and Girls Clubs Association to perform therapy, as simple as letting people pet him. He also hopes there are more animal-friendly providers. Co-host of today's event, Animals Asia, noted there are around 100 doctor dogs around town serving people in need. Among them, 20 canines took part in today's event to hop on a joyride with volunteers on MTR for a day. Currently, only guide dogs and animals approved by the MTR are allowed within premises belonging to the rail operator. But the corporation says this is only a trial and it will consider whether the plan can continue after gathering opinions from stakeholders and passengers. General Manager of the MTR's Marketing and Customer Experience, Annie Leung, said that's because certain people are sensitive towards animals, so that is still open for discussion. The MTR says passengers who met these doctors can smile at them and greet them, but not touch them. Passengers who don't feel comfortable being with dogs can choose to board carriages apart from the last one.
Hong Kong University of Science and Technology has successfully launched a high-resolution optical satellite for research purpose. Secure Ip has more.
Being one of the most advanced civilian satellites, its data such as weather, temperature, carbon dioxide level, etc., will be used to build a landslide monitoring system for Hong Kong to test the water. It will be applied in land cover mapping, disaster assessment and response, as well as urban planning and smart cities.
The satellite data really provides the real-time, real depiction of the disasters. And combined with other data, we can actually build a prediction system for the risk of the disasters. And also we can expand that system to the whole world, especially to help the underdeveloped countries to use that system to predict their infrastructures. So this actually work does have a very global impact.
There are 4 HKUST students participating in the satellite launch of the Constellation program. The university will establish an interdisciplinary research team by recruiting more students and researchers, local and overseas. Sakura Ip, TVB News.
To sports now, Spain's 23 world champions and 58 other Spanish players have said they will no longer play for the national team unless the head of the country's football federation resigns. Luis Rubiales controversially kissed player Jenny Hermoso on the lips after Spain won the Women's World Cup in Australia. He said it was consensual, but the player denied it, saying she was victimized. On Friday, Rubiales defiantly refused to resign, casting himself as the victim at an emergency meeting of the Federation in Madrid. In response, around 100 protesters, mostly young women, gathered at the body's headquarters on Friday evening in support of the women's team and Hermoso. That's the news. Thanks for watching.